will not end. So, we're your conductors, hosts. My name is Levi Rowland. This is Brian Cain. We are both high priest in the Alexandrian tradition of witchcraft, and Brian is also the founder and current high priest of the New Orleans Coven. We're coming to you live from Hex here in New Orleans. If you're watching us through Hex Education on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. We will see your questions, and we will answer them. So tonight's topic is original practice. Interesting title. So I'm going to let Brian give a little intro as to what we mean by that.
So before I do that, because I always forget, Levi wants season 3 to be more of a call-in show. So you're all welcome to call in. We know how to answer the phone now. Have a question or two, hopefully on the topic, but you can ask any question about witchcraft in general, and we'd be happy to answer that.
Happy to.
The number is 504-321-3472. We also are using a program that we've always used called Restream, right?
I believe so.
I think that's the one we're using. And because we use two different ones. But anyway, to let you know, it streams on Facebook and YouTube live simultaneously. But we would like you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Covendom at Hex Education, because that is the place people find the show later.
Yep.
And so a lot of our Facebook guests don't use the YouTube. They don't use the YouTube. So people are subscribing. So if you are fans of the show, please hit subscribe. Thank you. So original practice. We figured, this conversation comes up a lot in a lot of different arenas on a lot of different subjects. So tonight we're going to be trying to focus on the original witchcraft practices of the initiatory craft, priesthood, religion of witchcraft, what some people would like to call Wicca. But we're going to be focusing on really sort of the ideas and concepts and practices that were pulled together by Gerald Gardner in his first coven. So in a sense, kind of pre-Gardnerian, really, because the term Gardnerian and Alexandrian hadn't been coined yet.
Yep.
And yes, we've developed in different lineages, newer practices, but the fundamental core is still there, and it's shared universally between Gardnerians and Alexandrians for the most part. Obviously, you're always going to have people who lose information or who make changes or don't like things or interpret them in a different way. So we're going to try to take, we're really not going to so much focus on our opinions about things other than what is, right?
I feel like Brian's opinions will come out.
I'm sure they will, and both of our parts come out on the subjects. But what we're going to kind of talk about is some of those original practices. So I don't want to just outline them all because they'll come up, as we talk. Obviously, what my goal is always to sort of have that educational process, that conversation, because nowadays when you talk about the subject of Wicca, you're not saying anything at all. When you talk about the subject of witchcraft, you're not saying anything at all. A lot of people want to put Gardnerians and Alexandrians into the box of, witchcraft as a magical practice and Wicca as the religion. And obviously, if you've watched any of our programs, you know that that's not how initiates feel.
No.
I don't even use the word Wicca. And when I do say it, I pronounce it correctly. Not going to go on that hill right now.
This is the hill he will die on, people. It's a thing.
I prefer the word witch and calling my religion the religion of witchcraft. However, people like to put us in the box. The problem is that too is just as diverse now as the word witch. So you have people who are like the park pagans or the magicians of the mall who, they're going off something completely different, a completely different structure. It has nothing in common with what we do. So we really don't fit into any box any more than anyone else does. But what we're focusing on is the religion and initiatory system that has come to be known as Gardnerian or Alexandrian witchcraft. Mm-hmm. So obviously one of the key foundational parts of that was introduced to the world in the 1950s is the goddess, right? So we educated the public on two things.
Yep.
That we witches worship a goddess, and that the concept of the devil in witchcraft was really the horned god, and that witches did not worship the devil, they worshipped a pre-Christian god who was often identified as the devil, mistakenly. So
that was very much the sort of the outline of what they were trying to do and what they were trying to speak to, and we had this massive rebirth of contemporary witchcraft in England. And I think it's very interesting that Brian says something that I think is important here, which is we're talking about pre-Gardnerian, and it's important to say that because terms are created oftentimes by their opposites, right? So, for example, the term suffragette, which was used to describe people who were, for women's right to vote, that was coined by people who didn't want women to have the right to vote. And the term Methodist was coined by Anglicans who did not like the people following John Wesley. They were too methodical. They followed the method, right? The rule of life. So they were called Methodist. Lots of terms have happened like this throughout history. Gardnerian witchcraft did not become a thing really until I think the first person who really hammered home the difference was Cochrane.
I believe it was a derogatory term that he used to describe those witches.
The Gardnerians,
now, what's interesting is, and we can get into that in talking about original practice, I'm of the opinion that people like Robert Cochrane and Sybil Leek and those individuals were mimicking Gerald Gardner's work, really, even though they were adversarial and saying they were pre. But one example of this is both of those, whether you're talking about Charles Cardell, Robert Cochrane, or Sybil Leek, they all said the same thing. We worship a goddess and a horned god.
Yep.
So they had the same narrative that Gerald Gardner was putting out there.
Yeah, it was a shared communal narrative. Absolutely.
So regardless of where you think its origins come from, that they were all saying the same thing. So no one was saying anything different. I was thinking the other night about the fact that the devil's become increasingly popular, and people, I put it in my book.
And we did a whole show on it.
Yeah, we did a whole show about it. But I think it's important that people understand that, we don't really worship the devil. There are people who like that word and they want to live there, and we can see that. We can say, yes, if I look at the folklore of witchcraft, I see my God in that.
Yes.
I don't see the Satan of the Bible. So there is some truth to it, but I don't live there. I think the taboo of it or the spookiness of it appeals to some people, and that's fine. But you're talking about a movement that has been since the 50s, and here we are in 2020, teaching the general public that witches do not worship the devil. And that was one of the first things we were trying to teach people. We're not evil, we don't worship the devil. So you can't really be surprised when people who are a part of that legacy might take umbrage to people who are saying, oh, yes, we do.
Yes.
Because we've been saying, to Satanists, the Anton LaVey Satanists, they're not witches.
And we say it, I think what's important is also witchcraft is never, and this is a lesson that was hard for me as an initiate. I'm very bookish. I'm a teacher. I like things laid out. It took me a long time, and I think I've gotten there now, but it took me a long time to get used to this very unique way of teaching in witchcraft, which can be tongue-in-cheek sometimes, which puts things back on you, which makes you question things, which doesn't really release all the information in the beginning. It's very much like a fairy tale journey. That is the journey of initiation, right? You've eaten the food, you danced with the women, you're underneath the mounds, and you have to play by new rules. And it took me a while to get used to that form of teaching. And so we have said, well, me more than Brian, I've been very guilty of it, sort of tongue-in-cheek, about the devil. Sure. But that in itself is a form of teaching, right? And that was part of original practice, was that when we talked about the devil, initiation, sexuality, things that could be a little shocking, it was done carefully.
The devil is definitely historically in the culture of witchcraft. However, you have to understand that it is the culture put forward by the church. Right?
Yeah.
And if you were to follow that as factual, witches also eat babies, witches also fly through the air, you can't just choose one little narrative of that and say that piece is fact.
Don't eat babies.
Everything else is made up. It's all fantasy.
It's very high in cholesterol.
We have, in the modern witchcraft movement, identified that devil with our horned god, and there is a belief, whether it's factual or not, there's a mythos that witches were not worshiping the devil, they were really worshiping the horned god, and that, or some other pagan identity, and that was what the Christians were misunderstanding. You can historically go back to the early church and find references of them calling pagan gods demons or devils.
Yeah.
Even Aphrodite was considered a demon or a devil in certain
Astarte becomes Astaroth.
Greek works. You look at those woodcuts as a witch, and you see, the witch with the little familiar demon-like spirits, and, I think, it was probably originally fairies and nature spirits being misinterpreted. But you've got people now who use that as justification to be like, oh, look, I work with the Goetia, I work with demons.
I know.
Nothing to do with witchcraft. They're creating a fantasy out of a fantasy, whereas I'm looking at that through the lens of the church and through the lens of superstition and saying, if there's any truth to that, it was something else.
And I want to say two things. First, blessed be to the initiates. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Christian. Kevin. Also, we see all your comments. Thank you for all the sweet well wishes, and we're happy to be back too. It makes me happy to be here talking to all of you. The second
Levi
thing,
has HPV, everyone.
Why would you say that
randomly?
I don't.
He told me he has HPV.
Okay, this is where we're starting. I didn't say that for anyone watching.
He did.
I didn't. What I said is we were talking sexuality. So came
you
up
don't
in
have
circle.
HPV.
No,
you don't have HPV.
How would I? No, Brian. Why are you asking me this?
Because you said everyone has HPV.
I was telling him that in modern sex ed, like because I teach or whatever.
Now you're saying you don't have it.
I told Brian that he got freaked out about it, and because I was saying that it is like super common.
Ellie and me do not have HPV.
This is not the conversation. Why would you do this?
Because it's fun to trip you up.
Anyway.
Because I'm the devil. Anyway,
this is the devil, people. And also, do your research. Don't listen to him.
So that's one original practice, obviously, that came forward is the gods, right, that we worship. Nowadays, you've got people who prefer to, I've seen initiates call themselves polytheists. I find it very strange.
I love how you've just barreled past this. Like you did.
That was just a commercial blip for comic relief. So, they say, well, we're polytheists. And I think, what have you been reading? I think that happens a lot, but you don't know with initiates what training they got. Really.
No, you don't.
You can't assume they got the same training. You can't assume they have the same materials. I always say, and Levi agrees with me, that we're really more like Neoplatonists. So sometimes we get to play like polytheists, but I certainly wouldn't consider myself a polytheist. I just don't. No. Just like I don't consider myself a pagan. So we're going to move a little bit past the gods because we've addressed that already. That all the early witchcraft traditions said that witches worshipped a moon goddess and a horned god. And that includes Gardnerian, Alexandrian, Robert Cochrane, Charles Cardell, Sybil Leek, all of them. They all agreed on that, right? Yes. Not on the names, not on the who's, but they all agreed on that. So there is that. That's one that's an original practice that's maintained today. However, I think it's misinterpreted a lot. Mm-hmm. I think people don't understand that we do have names. We've got secret initiatory names that vary a little bit in lineage. We have, a secret name of the goddess that, sorry, it's never been publicized. You don't know it unless you're one of us, and a high priesthood to boot. There are alternatives on lineage,
that is part of the issue too.
The American Gardnerians have their own names that are different from everyone else's. I'm not saying that to be derogatory, it just happens to be the truth. Obviously Charles Cardell and Robert Cochrane used different names. Mm-hmm. Cochrane used Tubal Cain, which is from the Masons, but that was the name of his horned god. He also had a secret name of the goddess that I'm not aware of. Supposedly he had some sort of number riddle to it. I don't think anyone knows anymore because he didn't really have a legacy. Robert Cochrane's legacy is in people's minds, now. And I think it's funny that the Stang Gang, as we like to call them, the people who are really promoting the whole devil thing now and idolizing Cochrane, don't realize that he worshipped a goddess.
Yes, he did.
It was not different.
It just got evaporated from the conversation. I don't know how that happened.
Well, you know how it happened.
Well, I do.
But anyway, I'm saying original practice. Now we can historically go back and find these original practices too. You find the horned god in the devil and the concept of the devil and how he looks. And the fact that he doesn't look like anything in the Bible. You've got the pitchfork being an emblem of Neptune, Hades, and Serapis. Yep. You've got the horns being an emblem of many, many nature gods. You've got the association with hell and the underworld being associated with many, many pagan gods, some of which we just named. The hounds of hell, or Herne and his hunting hounds. There's so many, different versions to where these all fit into pagan imagery. If you took a statue of Serapis and showed it to a medieval Christian, the devil.
That's the devil.
They would know
Look at him with his horns and his pitchfork.
But nothing in the Bible describes the devil that way, so that the idea is that these were demonized pagan gods, really. So, in the goddess, historically, we have that the earliest church records talk more about witches worshipping a goddess, predominantly Diana, or variations of her name, and that's a historic record. That was the first thing. It wasn't the devil. And you can even find later on examples of the devil being exchanged with the Queen of Elfine.
Yep, the Queen
and
of the Fae.
Sometimes the devil would be described as a woman or appearing as a woman. So there is a historical folklore side to this. There's an intellectual, academic side to it. There's speculation to it. Mm-hmm. But in all modern practice, that was the case. No witches between the 1950s and probably way into the 70s weren't worshiping those two things. There was not a movement of spellcasting witches at that time. There wasn't. Anton LaVey's organization came up, I believe, in the 70s, right?
Might have been late 60s. I'd have to double check.
But he was really...
The Black House in San Francisco.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about that. But he wasn't promoting it as witchcraft. They do sometimes call their female adherents witches, but it wasn't a big thing. They were Satanists. That's what they were calling themselves. It was only weird talk shows that were calling Satanists and witches the same thing at the same time, with the whole...
Caused some issues.
D&D paranoia.
D&D paranoia.
Well, there was altogether.
I know,
remember?
the Satanic Panic,
the Satanic Panic.
No, that was 100% thing. So Wicked Witch has a question. Does each coven have their own name, since we're talking about the god and goddess being named in traditional craft, or is it just different traditions?
In original practice, there's one secret name of the goddess that has been passed down to all Gardnerians and Alexandrians. Mm-hmm. However, somewhere along the lines in the American Gardnerian lines that we call the Olwen lines, which would consist of Long Island, Kentucky, and California lines, someone changed the name of the god and the goddess. And there's different mythoses. Some people say Olwen and Gardner changed the walks. Some people say different reasons why, but they all know. They may not know the original, some of them. I have met one that didn't. I'm aware of, we are aware of both versions because of the fact that we have California upline in our lineage. So we have that information, and we respect it. It's fine. They're both secret
I would never
names.
blaspheme it.
No, it is a secret name within those lines. So really, I guess in modern craft, there are two versions. However, within different lineages, there's variations of how to say mini names. Mm-hmm. So there are variations in the lines, but really there is, each coven does not have their own names.
No.
In Gardnerian or Alexandrian witchcraft, we have a priesthood name for it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a shared lineage with that.
What people need to realize, so original practice, moving on from the gods, that was another thing that was original practice, is initiation.
Yes.
So the original practice, going from, and we're going to use the 50s. Some people speculate that this can be traced to the 30s, and some movement that was held by everything going.
Yep.
Where she was hereditary. That big. You have to be initiated, feel it to be true, has gone beyond for it to be a tangible. Some people.
Back, everybody.
So we don't know. Obviously, we don't know what you're seeing. Somehow the internet went down. Now the comments are frozen. Is it recording now? Can you tell?
Yes, we're on.
All right. I have no idea where we left off, so we're just going to reiterate some of those things. Obviously, we were discussing the fact that in original witchcraft practice, it was universally held between Gardnerians, Alexandrians, Robert Cochrane, Charles Cardell, Sybil Leek. All these various traditions, they all worshipped a goddess and a horned god, and they all practiced initiation. We were talking about how this is original practice. I'm giving a sum up in case it didn't get recorded at all, who knows. Or is this going to be a whole new recording now?
No, I think we're good now.
So basically, that was original practice, and we were talking about how the original teachings in Gardnerian and Alexandrian craft require initiation. So there's some initiates that might feel like that's valid, and that's fine because it is a part of our teachings. And then I was going on with my own narrative about how I feel like that witchcraft has gone beyond the bounds of that on some level, that the religion of witchcraft is accessible, and that there's enough information to be tangible that I think people can practice the religious side of it without being, without being initiated. So I think they're valid witches in their own right. I don't consider spellcasting to be just witchcraft, though. Sorry. I do think you have to be somewhat engaged in the actual modern tradition of witchcraft. I don't mind if people identify as being a witch for their own reasons, but I don't follow everyone's narrative, obviously. That's not going to happen. So I respect people's narratives, but that doesn't mean I follow them. I've got a friend who's practices voodoo, and of course they do animal sacrifices sometimes in voodoo, and it's been kind of a sore subject because I don't believe in animal sacrifice, and I really had to bring it home to him at one point and say, of course I don't, or I'd be doing it.
Yeah.
And that made sense to him finally, I think, anyway. So we all have our own practices and our beliefs, so if you got initiated, it's pretty fair to say you believe it's necessary, or thought it was necessary on some level, so it mattered to you. You didn't do it just because. So you can safely assume people who got initiated believe in initiation.
Exactly.
Which I do, and it's a part of original practice. So now let's move forward to something else. Do we have any questions?
Yes.
First? It still looks a little choppy. Do you see my hands?
It could be if you're having any connection issues. We did have a little bit of an internet freeze
keep
here.
us informed
let
how
us
this
know.
is coming, because we don't know that we're just not talking to ourselves. Every time we come back
and
with
most
the
people,
show, we have problems.
I know, it's just
time.
God's cursing us.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are saying that they're working on Facebook and they're working on YouTube. Thank you so much for letting us know. So we did have one that actually is a perfect segue into what we were going to talk about, which is I believe it's Suze was asking, what are the initiation practices?
Before we get into that, I want to also invite call-ins, because Levi wants us to be a call-in show, and I was like, I don't think it's going to work because no one calls in. Make sure we know how to answer the phone, but we would like to have people call in, and once somebody does it, it encourages others to do it. It makes the show more interesting. The number is 504-321-3472. We really encourage you to call in with questions. We'd love to hear from you. And call-ins will take priority over chat questions.
See, the magic of
but this question was, what
are the initiation practices?
I'm not quite sure I understand that question.
So here's what, if I can take on it, and if you're watching, you can always update. But
it doesn't sound like an articulate question. No offense, but I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Poor Brian. Never. Somebody asks a question, it's like, it's your fault that I can't answer that question.
It's not clear what they're asking. What are the practices, like what do we do in them? We're not going to tell you that.
Yeah, we can't talk about that. But I think
we can talk about it. We're not going to.
I think we're
going to get to that.
Clearly state is that witchcraft, in its modern rebirth, whether you believe that is a continuation, whether you believe it's completely modern, irrelevant. In the religion as understood by Gardner, his original covens, by the Sanders, by many others, including people like Brian said outside of Gardner and Alexandria.
Who are following their own narratives of the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Initiation is not optional. There's no such thing in the original practices as a self-initiated witch. There's no such thing as a witch alone. You know what I mean? So it does.
The call number is 504-321-3472. Would you type it in chat? I don't think.
Yeah, I can also tap in chat.
So I'm going to clarify that question. I wasn't attacking the person who asked the question. I just wasn't quite sure what they were asking. So obviously the initiation practices our focus tonight is on original practice, obviously. So originally there was no such thing as a dedication. A dedication is, in my mind, it's more of a modern invention. It doesn't really exist in antiquity, really. But I thought it was a nice. I approve of the authors who started calling it that versus calling it self-initiation, because the title self-initiation really confuses people, and it's not authentic or honest. I really think that was just a way to sell books and to empower people in a way. But then it does create some confusion. Historically speaking, you can't initiate yourself in anything. You can't initiate yourself as a Mason. You can't initiate yourself in a tribe. There's so many things it's a community thing, right?
Yeah.
Initiation is generally a community process. And although there's the definition of initiation starting something, that has nothing to do with the rituals of initiation. Initiating a court proceeding is not the same thing as initiating witchcraft, right?
No.
So people try to make that argument, and it's asinine, honestly. So what are the practices? Well, obviously, we don't divulge what we do in the initiation, regardless of what has or has not been published. When somebody's initiated, we don't tell them what's going to happen beforehand. They don't know who's going to initiate them. They don't know how it's going to be done. So, they may have read things. They may have ideas. But until they've gone through it, they really don't know. We do not give you that information. That's something you have to, that's why it's an initiation.
Exactly.
So you don't get to have a say in it. You don't get to, some things, depending on the lineage, may be told to you. You're going to be given some preparations
of course,
of things you need to do, but you're not going to have the full story until you've gone through it. And you don't, it's not optional what happens. So it's not a negotiable, in my coven, I can say nobody knows who's going to initiate them until they're initiated.
Yeah.
No one's got that knowledge even. They don't even know who's going to be doing it. So
no, as it should be. It's a mystery. That's the whole point.
Cindy, but if you want to clarify that question, I'll be happy to try to answer it. I'm just not quite sure what you're asking.
Yeah, because like Wicked Witch said something that would sum this up nicely. If you initiate yourself, there are no mysteries, right? You can't mysteriously have that moment. I do want to address, Cindy asked, she said this is her first time tuning in. Welcome. And she said it sounds like we're talking about solely Wiccan is the term you're using.
All right,
is this
let me
correct?
clarify that again. Yeah. So she's just tuning in and backpedaling us. No. This channel is, focused on initiatory witchcraft. It's focused on Gardnerian and Alexandrian craft, though we do talk about other historical things. So if you get a chance to watch the beginning of the program, hopefully it's still there. We already clarified some of these things. So some people, like to use the word Wicca, and some people like to create boxes. They like to say that Wicca's the religion, witchcraft is the practice, and I did already say all this stuff, but I want to answer her question again. But just because that's the box that you've developed, those boxes don't really work anyway, because you cannot put us in the same box as Scott Cunningham. It's not the same thing. And so, for us, we're going to speak from our narrative. And on our narrative, Wicca and witch are interchangeable words to initiates. They mean the exact same thing. It's Old English to modern English. We have always preferred the word witch. We call our religion witchcraft. So the modern narrative that you do encounter quite a lot really has nothing to do with us, and it was not defined by us, and it is not used by us predominantly. So it's not in our materials, it's not in our original books. So this program is about the religion of witchcraft. And tonight we're talking about original practice. And original practice would have been that what you call Wicca is just an old word for witch. And it was used interchangeably.
Yeah, we don't buy into that dichotomy.
Yes and yes. If you're saying I don't know what the word Wicca means to you, but the word Wicca means to me is witch, and it's technically pronounced witcha, and it means a male witch in Old English. So, but we're not going to get too much on that subject.
Yeah, it's. I just refuse to play that game. Like, are you Wiccan or are you witch? That's.
But if you're asking if we're talking about the religion of witchcraft, yes, we are, and we're initiates of the Alexandrian tradition.
Yes, Stacey has one I'll take. Is that the same for a solitary practitioner as far as initiation?
This is actually a really important thing, and I don't want to cut you off because I know you've got something to say. But in original practice, there was no such thing as a solitary practitioner.
That's what I was gonna. There is. It's not a thing.
You carry the ball.
It's not a thing. Like and what's funny is I get why it is, why it's so important for a lot of people, because in many instances it is difficult to find people.
The number says it's unavailable.
Let me see. If you're looking for the number for call-in, I put it in chat.
I'm going to call in right now, just to see if I can call in.
Brian is obsessed.
Well, because you wanted this.
I did.
I was going to come up with other ideas. You wanted this, and I didn't think it was going to work.
Call-in.
So I'm seeing if it works.
You're calling us?
Brian's
calling from beyond the grave.
Unless you've forgotten how to answer the phone or it's not on.
It's right here.
Is it ringing? Because I'm calling.
Yes.
Yeah, you might. It is available because I just did it. Mm-hmm. The number is 504-321-3472. It is a working number.
Yeah. So it might be an issue.
It might be something you dialed wrong, or you didn't do the long distance ride or something. I don't know what you're doing.
Brian is being harsh on the viewers today.
I don't think I am.
It's just like, your question's garbage. You can't dial a phone. Get out of the house.
I love our viewers. I don't think any of their questions are garbage. I'm just trying to answer honestly. Now, keep in mind, tonight we are talking about original practice from the 1950s, probably well into the 80s, that it was the only real standard practice. What most people are encountering now is layers and layers of really new stuff. When I first got into witchcraft in the 90s, nobody was saying some of the things that people say now all the time. Nobody was saying witchcraft and Wicca are two different things.
Okay, so we do have a call.
Not happening.
We did get a call from a viewer. Hello, welcome to Covendom.
You can't hear them.
Oh, hello.
Oh, is that the problem?
Yes. Hello, welcome to Covendom. Can you hear us?
Hi, Brian. Hi, Levi.
Hello. Who's this?
This is White Hawk.
Hi, White Hawk.
Nice
I
to
haven't
meet
heard
you.
your voice in
Hi,
a really
sweetheart.
long time.
How are you?
This is, for anyone who knows, way back in the day when there was a show called Hex Education, and I used to be a producer on it as well as a co-host at one point in time, that White Hawk was one of the regular callers. Long before I was ever even with Christian, she was a regular caller because I used to listen to the show.
It's good to see you, gentlemen. I have a question because I'm not understanding this self-initiation.
Mm-hmm.
I was initiated. I don't understand people who say they're self-initiated.
Well,
Where
I mean,
come from?
in original practice, there was no such thing as self-initiation. And then there were a few authors who wrote books who put in their books self-initiation rituals. Mm-hmm. It was very quickly turned into self-dedication rituals by future authors, which I thought was more feasible. And, you know, I think it was Doreen Valiente's one of the early ones, writes, I think she calls it self-initiation, but it might be dedication, I don't remember.
I can't remember.
But it's, you know, it is a dedication. It's you going to the altar and saying, I'm here to serve you, recognize me. In my book, I sort of tied that into, you know, asking the gods to guide you on your path and maybe guide you to the right coven and guide you to initiation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I did a ritual like that. I did the one out of Doreen Valiente's book. I had a person once call me out on it and say, well, you did it, so you must think it's valid. And I think, yes, but then I went and got initiated.
Yeah.
So it's like, I did do that, and I did think it was valid, but I didn't recognize it as an initiation. Historically, in the occult or in original practice of witchcraft, there's no such thing as self-initiation. It doesn't even make any sense. And, you know, but we're not devaluing you going to your altar and talking to your gods and
not at all.
Making a bond with your gods. And if they're listening, they're listening. Nobody can stop that. But it wouldn't.
Don't we do that every time we cast a circle?
I'd like to think so.
Yes.
We should do that anyway, initiated or not.
I agree. But nowadays you've got a narrative that would be very alien to us, White Hawk, and that's people who, you know, identify as being witches, but are not actually worshipping anything.
Yes.
You know, they're just casting spells and taking Instagram pictures and working with demons. Got to throw that one in there anytime I mean,
so much fun.
Yes.
Well, I can't say that, you know, to me, witchcraft is gray. It's not black. It's not white. There's no good witch. There's no bad witch. It is what it is.
Well, it's a nature-oriented thing, magic, you know, and so yes, it's going, you know, I mean, is the black widow spider evil, you know, because she eats her mate? You know, I don't know. Nature didn't seem
interesting. That's the one he goes to.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm picking my teeth now from my dinner on my husband.
Did you want to ask another question, White Hawk?
Yeah. In your initiation ceremony, they're full coven, right?
Correct.
You have your whole coven.
If there is a coven, yes.
Yeah.
Now, when you say the person being initiated doesn't know who's going to do the initiation, I naturally assume, because of my path, that the initiator has to be a high priest or priestess.
Yeah, that's not necessarily true. So what I will say is that in Gardnerian and Alexandrian craft, a high priest or high priestess does have to be present, and that is true. So they are involved. They are always involved. I think that there are covens where the high priest and the high priestess do everything, you know, which I think is really egocentric in my way. I wouldn't want to send people out to start their own covens if they've never been trained on how to initiate. I think that in the original, and I can say in original Alexandrian rituals, Alex and Maxine would often have first degrees perform initiations or other witches under their guidance. So they were there. They were obviously involved in the ritual. But no, it does not necessarily have to be a particular person in the coven. As long as you have the sufficient rank and there is a high priest or high priestess guiding the initiation, it is valid.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for calling in.
The 13th.
Thank you so much for calling in. So, again, the phones are open. And I did turn it up, so we should be able to hear if you've had some issues calling in before. I rectified that. I do want to address a couple that came through really quick. Sorry, we had a bunch of comments come in, guys, while we were on the phone. So Elohim asked, how do you feel about people who are initiated Gardnerian, then switch to Alexandrian and sort of jump back and forth between the two? I can give a quick answer to this, and then Brian will definitely be able to elaborate because he's had more experience with this. I don't think it's a good idea. I think that, honestly, the traditions are separate for a reason. We are still kissing cousins. But I think there is a philosophical difference to how we approach a lot about craft. And if you're constantly flitting back and forth, I don't think your training is going to be solid. I don't think you're going to build up a relationship to the culture and egregore of the tradition. And I think you're going to end up with a sort of loose amalgamation of both. That's probably not going to be very fulfilling. There is a separate culture to our tradition. To be Alexandrian is something unique. We talk differently. We speak to, we speak to each other differently. There are unique things that we do. And they're not just habits. They're also philosophical. They stem from things that Alex and Maxine and other elders saw within craft that we change with consciousness. It was a conscious decision. And you're losing that if you're constantly flitting between the two.
It's a very simple and a very complicated question, because in one hand it's like, think of it as in the Catholic Church you have, and I always mess this up, you have the Jesuits and then you have the Franciscans.
And the Carmelites, and yeah.
They're all Catholic, but they are different orders with certain separate agendas, separate focuses, separate culture, really, a culture within a culture. Within all the lines, and I talk about this in my book, Initiation into Witchcraft, it's how you plug yourself, Initiation into Witchcraft, by Brian Cain.
Available
on iTunes. No. So basically, you're hopefully brought into one of these cultures within a culture, and you're given all the information, which is training, right? Not just handing you a book or having you copy a book, but actually teaching you what they're, it's kind of like a family, if you don't teach what your parents taught you, a lot of that gets lost nowadays, but in old cultures, that was really an important process.
Yep.
And that's true in witchcraft. So you, of course, will have, unfortunately, we do have lines and covens that didn't get good training. Doesn't make them any less valid. I think because of the modern age, they have more so the ability now to seek good training, but because of ego, a lot of them choose not to. But more and more initiates do go back and get the good training, which comes from Britain. Let's not lie to ourselves. Witchcraft did not originate in the United States. Not in the ancient world and not in the modern world.
How dare you?
So
it's from Wisconsin.
The British still very much retain all of that really hardcore original practice information that is only available to initiates. And some Americans have tapped into that and continue to do so, and they're the ones who are getting the really good information. But along with that, it's like a culture that's coming through. So if you were to, live 3 years with an Italian family and then go live 2 years with a Greek family and have those experiences, neither of those experiences are really going to make you Italian or Greek. And the more of those experiences you have, the less likely you're ever going to be a part of that culture truly. You're just visiting. Mm-hmm. You are a tourist. So I think people who tradition hop are spiritual tourists. And they might collect the labels, but I doubt very much they're really getting the information.
Agreed.
After this, we need to bounce on to a new part of the topic.
We do. So we've got a call. Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hi there. This is Alex from New York.
Hello,
Hi, Alex.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Also, you must have a headset or something. This voice is clear.
What's that?
I said you have a very clear voice on here.
Levi's flirting with you.
He is not.
Oh.
But continue.
I can take what I can get. No. So I was just wondering, because I recall in previous episodes, stories of being part. I think Brian mentioned being a part of a different coven from an quote unquote other lineage or what have you in previous years before being an Alexandrian initiate. Could you articulate like the difference in experience between more other quote unquote?
Well, my original is actually really funny because I was just talking last night to my original teacher from that line, and they were practicing what they said it was they said it was witchcraft, right? And the formulation, the Book of Shadows we used, and what we were practicing was following the narrative of Gerald Gardner. I mean, it just was. So there was a lot of really heavy emphasis on Celtic things within that tradition, but it really wasn't a named tradition. It had its own lineage and it called itself witchcraft. Some of us very early on speculated they were probably Gardnerians, because a lot of the things were. But I think in truth, I have traced that lineage back through, I think, 5 different people. So it does go back a bit. I think the originator, however, just started a coven, right? And was going off the witchcraft narrative at the time and collected things, put them together, and started a group and began passing that on. I think that happens to a lot of us. So how I think of it now is kind of like my elementary school of witchcraft. So I was initiated into witchcraft by a weird, organic, very small witch cult. That's not connected to the line of succession that Gardnerians and Alexandrians are. It created its own, but it was following the religion of witchcraft. And it was honestly the most authentic thing I would have encountered at that time. I was young and I lived in Washington and I wasn't, there was no internet really. Not that I'm not that old, but it really was like, it was pre-AOL, really, honestly. So
he's dating himself.
A little bit dating myself. So it was the most authentic thing I was going to get. But we worshipped the moon goddess and the horn of God. We did 3 degrees of initiation. We used the same tools. We worked naked. We did magic. So a lot of it was grafted off of probably published works. Mm-hmm. I think that Lady Sheba was probably source material for them, to be honest with you, if they didn't know her in some way. I do know one of the original women in it, and they're still very private, so I respect that. I do know she was in the Covenant of the Goddess and knew Raymond Buckland. So there was definitely some organic things going on within that line, but they just called themselves witches, and it was my introduction into the religion of witchcraft, and I was initiated into their order, I guess you could say. I don't know if that really answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I just had a second question.
Sure.
It's kind of a separate question. And you both articulated this a bit previously to what I could tell through the buffers. But could you articulate at what point you all would consider timeline-wise a practice to be coming from an original place versus stemming off from it? Because I feel like
do you mean like where the line is?
The
line of succession, in my mind, which not everyone would agree, exists within Gardnerian and Alexandrian craft. There are fringe groups that claim to be connected to Gardnerian and Alexandrian craft. To date, I have not experienced a case of that where I was convinced it was true, right? So, for instance, there was a group at one point in time called, I might get this wrong, Blue Star.
Yes, Blue Star Wicca.
Blue Star Wicca that was very popular down here. They claimed that someone in their upline was Alexandrian, but there's never been any proof of this, number one. Number two, there's no proof that any of the training was passed on. So it's always examples like that, and I don't want to name current people or embarrass anyone, but usually I find that when there's a backstory that somebody was Gardnerian or somebody was Alexandrian and then they changed into something else, I usually suspect that as a lie. And the reason being is because why would you? Yeah. Why would you claim a lineage for validity that you're not practicing? Right?
And
makes no sense.
Well,
I'm not saying it doesn't exist, though. So if a line really did go back to the originators in some way, it would be as part of that succession. I've just never encountered a case of it where I think it's true. Now, the succession can always be questioned. You know, you could go back to Alex, or you can go back to Gardner. You can go back to Gardner, and you can question their validity and their backstories. But we do know that's where it comes from. So that part of it is where the line of succession can truly be traced. The mythos that Gardner got something beforehand, that is a matter of faith and belief for the individuals.
Yeah.
But what we know for a fact is that the modern priesthood of witchcraft, the only priesthood cult of the goddess in the West, started with that man, and it continued. And what we can say about the proof in the pudding in the Gardnerian and Alexandrian lines is that we are global, we exist around the world today, it's still going on, and we are the North Stars of what some people like to call Wicca.
Yes.
You know, and we always will be. It's just set in stone. So that's the line of succession. You know, they have a line of succession in the Catholic Church, they have a line of succession in the Greek Orthodox Church. We have a line of succession in witchcraft, and you're either part of it or you're not. May not be important to everyone. You know, I wanted to be a part of something with history, story, and culture, and I believe in the power of initiation. And I believe in the power of those traditions because of the fact that it has worked and that it goes on today.
Yes.
There's like a manifestation behind it.
So that's the line in the sand. The line in the sand is there is an initiatory succession. When people step away from that and they no longer practice in the original practice that was handed down to them, they have ceased to be a part or continue that tradition.
You know, I can look at, and hopefully I don't get any shade for this, but my original line that I was in, you know, pre-Alexandrian, it flourished. It flourished like a weed in the garden, really. And there were a few covens formed around it. But now they're all gone. The gods used it and transplanted it to something else. All of those initiates are now Alexandrian or not working from my manifestation. You know, once I went, they either didn't continue working or they went too. And it doesn't exist anymore. So I think that's how magic works. You can tell when something's staying concurrent. I'm not saying those people don't exist.
I know.
So hopefully I'm not coming out weird to offend anyone, but it manifested power on a journey. I do believe, and Maxine coined this, I think, and I love the phrase, and I use it today, the path of initiation. I think once somebody's on the path of initiation, that is a magical path in witchcraft.
Yes.
And that path continues forever, and sometimes it starts before many rituals.
Very much so. Did that answer your questions, Alex?
Absolutely. Thank you
so
much.
Thank you for calling us in. No problem. That was not.
Good night.
You have a good night too, Alex. That was not a good use of prepositions
you
on my
point.
point.
You thought his voice was sexy.
No, I did not. I thought it was clear.
I'm trying to get him in trouble tonight.
You're never going to get me in trouble. Sorry. Like I am as faithful as the day is long.
Patrick, he's so in love with you. You're all he talks about. Trust me.
So we have another call. See, it is going to become a call-in show.
Because we got it going.
Hi, welcome to Covendom.
You need to let me jump topics after this.
Hello. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
Very good. I have to compliment you. I have learned so much just from tuning into Covendom, and I had the pleasure of meeting a couple of people at one of the stores in the New Orleans Tex.
Wonderful.
And she had asked me if I had ever thought about joining an actual coven.
God, it was
and
weird, wasn't it?
At the time, you know, I was not ready, and I could admit that.
Mm-hmm.
But I want a couple things. One is, what do I need to look for to follow that path? For you guys, what did you experience that you knew that, you know, this is where I want to go. I want to join. I want to be part of that history. I want to be part of that lineage. I want that tradition.
Yeah.
I want that education.
Well, for me, I'll go first because I know Levi's calculating. You know, when I got into witchcraft, I was obviously a solitary practitioner, just like everyone else. And that's what people need to realize. We all started out reading books nowadays. We all started out by ourselves. So when you see these initiates and you think we're all high on our laurels, we all started like you did at one point. We didn't get born an initiate. So really, it was at the time when I was reading books and studying, the idea of witchcraft was pretty cohesive. You know, the things being published by Llewellyn and the things being published by Phoenix and other occult booksellers, they were all saying the same thing. They were saying witchcraft was a religion. They were saying we worshipped a goddess. So it wasn't like I had been educated through books as to what witchcraft is, and that was the witchcraft that drew me in what I practiced. Mm-hmm. The goddess was a huge part of my becoming a witch. Like, that was a huge part. Magic was there, but I could have gone off and been a magician. It was the goddess that made it a religious thing for me. And I was more attracted to the goddess initially than the god, because he freaked me out a little bit. I thought he was the devil, you know, which goes back to it. You know, even in modern society, you see a young Christian seeing Pan is going to think, oh, it's the devil. You know, so it's a little ooky spooky, but the goddess was like an epiphany for me. So that's really what called me. And as I was reading, I think it was really, I mean, Raymond Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft was the eye-opener for me for the goddess, but it was The Witch's Way by Janet Stewart Farrar that made me know that I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be an initiate and I wanted to be a priest of the goddess. Mm-hmm. And I began seeking out and finding a coven and going through those initiations and making it a part of my life. And I just continued to do so. Once I became, you know, a full adult, fully in control of my own universe and left, you know, Washington State, I had more opportunities in a place like New Orleans to meet people from various magical paths. People who practice hoodoo, people who practice voodoo, people who were in the OTO, and various witches throughout the world. You know, when I met my husband, I was plugged into all of the living authors of the time. And, you know, some of them were rather disappointing. So I kept meeting all these witches throughout the world, and I eventually came to the decision that I wanted to take an initiation that was a part of that line of succession, because I was increasingly aware that although I very much valued my original initiations and my original group, and I still do, I was keenly aware they were not a part of that succession. And that mattered to me. Mm-hmm. You know, it wasn't a devaluing of my original line. It's just that line, I think, took me as far as it needed to take me at the time. Like I say, I now think of it as like elementary school or whatever. But the process never ends. That's why it's called the path of initiation. I think when you're on the path of initiation, it's a calling, and you just know. You're pulled. You're drawn. It becomes a driving force.
So to answer one part of your question, which was what do you do, right? I'm going to be a little bit more mundane than Brian on this one, because I've spoken, if you've watched any Covendom episodes, I can get real churchy and I talk about the gods in this very priestly, obsessively clerical way. I'm going to just say something a little bit more mundane here that I think is super important to anyone listening. You know what the real difference is? The real difference between an initiate and somebody who actually goes through with it versus somebody who just kind of flirts around with traditions and gets into eclectic practice and it doesn't really take them anywhere. Here's the secret. They just do it. Like that, they just do it.
Oh, like, there's a commitment.
Commitment is the difference. Like every initiate I know has thrown themselves to the gods. They've thrown themselves into the actual concept of initiation. The people I know who don't really make it down the path are the people who keep. I'll use a different analogy. I've used it before. Everyone I know who makes it sees a great river that they need to cross, and they pick a boat, they get in the boat, and they row across the river. Everyone I know who flounders in the spiritual path, whether it's our religion or a different one, is constantly switching boats or knitting together their own damn dinghy, you know, with straws and bits of hair and shit that they find on the beach. That's not going to take you anywhere. Like, the difference is get in the boat and row the damn boat. Like, find a coven, find a teacher, commit yourself to the gods, and actually do the work.
I do want to say a clarification that because of COVID-19, most covens right now, if not all covens, are not initiating. And that's for obvious reasons. We cannot alter our ritual, and there are things that we do in the ritual that are not social distancing friendly. Some covens haven't been meeting at all this year. You know, because of COVID-19. There are many covens that have been put on hold. I do believe a vaccine's around the corner, so I think 2021 is probably a realistic bet.
I hope so.
But what we can do is we can make the connections now, and you can begin the groundwork of getting to know people. even if that's on the telephone. So I still encourage people to move forward, but I do think this is a very discouraging year for any kind of, organic relationship. I'm sitting here risking my life because I'm sitting next to a teacher without a mask on.
First of all, we've been practicing rigid social distancing.
It's still scary. You know what my social distancing is? My husband and my poodles.
Anyway, does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Now, I was originally, prior to COVID-19, I had decided to do some more research. I believe, Levi, you are the one who told me to start looking at the Chaldean Oracle in reference to Hecate.
Chaldean Oracle sounds like something I would 100% tell someone to read.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was an amazing revelation for me.
Same.
So, yes. So I'm not discouraged by COVID-19.
It'll end.
You know what?
I mean, it won't
we
end.
lived through this in 1918. We're going to do it again.
We're going to do it again, yeah.
I do believe that there's a vaccine coming, and I think that's going to solve a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I'm a little, I'll be honest with everyone, I'm a little freaked out, but guess what? I'm going to take it. And then I'm going to be like, sorry, you didn't get vaccinated. I'm living my life now. If I turn into a mutant zombie, be it.
You're keeping the faith through this.
Well, the one place I had been told to look for potential covens and start doing meet and greets and actually getting to know people was on Witchbox. Well, we know that went.
It went away, yeah.
It's gone.
I actually met Levi on
Witchbox.
Yeah.
Okay, so the where to look thing is difficult. Here's one of the big things is social media rules now, whether we like it or not. So
it's not about websites anymore.
It's really not.
Nobody goes to websites, not really.
So
it's all social media.
It's all social media. So the reference here is you have to use social media, and you have to do it carefully. So you find places where you see a lot of initiates posting. You find places that seem to be in relationship with initiates that are publicly vetted or publicly
what you have to do is find out if there's one where you live. And the bad news for most people is the answer to that is going to unfortunately be no.
I already know it is no.
And if it's no, then your only recourse is to move or find a coven that's willing to work with you traveling.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. I wish that wasn't the answer, but it is the answer. We can't be where we're going to be. So the OTO is the Order Temple Orientis, which is a magician's magical... Somebody else was asking a question. Sorry, I never clarified that.
Yeah.
It's a magician's magical order that was once headed by Aleister Crowley, though it does predate him. And there is a temple here, and that's a perfect example. If you wanted to be in the OTO, you've got to go somewhere where the OTO is, or you have to be willing to travel to where they are, and they've got to be copacetic with that. I don't know what the rules are on that. So unfortunately that's the thing. But if you wanted to be a doctor, you got to go to law school. Well, you got to go where the law school is. The school ain't going to move to you. I think that the end game that happens a lot is if a group thinks that you really have the potential, and you're someone who could possibly start your own coven, and you're dedicated enough to follow through all of the training. They're going to want you to seat it where you are yourself. It's unrealistic to travel. It doesn't work out. It doesn't make for good training. It can happen, but I think usually the end game would be that someone's going to start shop in their hometown if they're not going to move. For instance, if I had somebody from Arizona who wanted to work with me, I'd probably only be interested if I thought that person was like someone who might start a coven in Arizona someday.
Yeah, that they have that potential.
Otherwise, and I've experimented with this, and, people can travel and they can learn quite a lot, but they do miss a lot. It's not the same. Being in a coven is, especially how we do things, we meet every week. That is a huge commitment for somebody who doesn't live here to be there every week. And if they're not there every week, they're really going to miss out. There's just no way they're not. They're not going to have the full training that someone has that's here all the time. Now, I do have a coven member who drives up from Florida every week, and she's got really good attendance. I was concerned about it, but we had that conversation right off the bat. If you were to do this, you're going to have to drive. And
she does.
It hasn't been an issue for her so far, and I'm amazed by that, but that's dedication. She drives from Florida to meet with us weekly for hours on end, So that's she needed to do to make it happen. So I do think it's more of a challenge for some people, but that's the truth. If you really want this, you are going to have to make sacrifices if you're not one of the lucky ones. If you're lucky and you live somewhere where it is, then you should go to the one that's there. And unfortunately, we can vouch for their lineage. We cannot always vouch for their training, because if we have not worked with them, we do not know. But it's a start, because if you've got something real, and let's say you get shoddy training, but you're sincere, you will be able to connect with priesthood later on, who can fill you in on the rest.
Absolutely. Does that answer your question?
Someone who wants to know.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for calling.
Have a good one. Bye.
You as well. I'm enjoying this call-in moment.
Okay, before we take any more calls, though, I want to shift, because we've only hit two things, right? So we've talked about the gods, and we've talked about initiation. I think one of those things in initiation that somebody was asking earlier is we don't really give very many details about initiation. Like, just hold off on that. Whoever's calling, I'm not going to answer quite yet, because I'm in mid-sentence. So call back.
Yeah, call us back.
So, basically, what are some of the other original practices? So we've got, obviously, the gods, right? We've got initiation, that this is a priesthood, that it's communal. And we've got magic, right? One of my favorite things, most asinine things that said a lot is, witchcraft's the practice, Wicca's the religion. That is the most idiotic thing that I've ever heard escape anyone's lips, and it's become extremely cosmopolitan and popular. Here's why. The religion of witchcraft is magical. It's a magical religion. Much like the cult of Isis was a magical religion. If you were initiated into the occult of Isis, you were a sorceress. You were a magician. It was a part of her ethos, right? Like, that was the thing. It's not a thing, it's a thing. They cast spells. That was a big part of her priesthood from ancient Egypt into Europe. And that's just factual. So it wasn't a religious thing. Witchcraft has never been like religions separated from magic. So the idea that there's a separate definition for this is the practice of magic for a witch and this is the religion of a witch, it's not separate. We don't separate. Magic is a part of our religious belief system, period. So you cannot be a witch who does not practice magic, because everything we do is magical. That's a huge part of our belief system. Probably one of the most fundamental parts of our belief system. We believe we are intimately connected with the cycles of the universe, and we play a role in how things turn out. We're not watching from afar. We're not innocent bystanders. We're responsible for every circle we carve out in our lives. And when we cast a circle, it's the first spell, right? Initiation is a spell. It's all a spell. It's all magic. So
all of it. There's no such thing as
separate.
non-magical
so original
witchcraft.
practice is magical. It is a magical religion. Witchcraft is, and it's one of the reasons I like the word witchcraft, is because it's a magical religion. That is a big part of our belief system. God, goddess, magic. Big thing.
I love how he's angry at somebody that's not here. Like no one has said this, and Brian's like, "Let me tell you, sir, ma'am,
yes.
my life is," and I'm like, everybody agrees. Like nobody's here who disagrees with you. Like,
no, so you don't know who might watch. Something.
He's getting upset.
I'm sure
by proxy.
I'll upset somebody.
Brian's mad by proxy.
Now, please call in. I just wanted to make sure we covered that. So
yeah, I'm sorry I hung up on you.
504-321-3472. Please call back. We'd love to hear from you.
I know.
I just wanted to make sure
hang up on him. I'm mid-sentence and I'm in a mood.
I wanted to make sure we're covering enough of the material so we don't have a whole episode of questions. But I do love the questions. So they'll probably now they hate us. They're not going to call back because you hung up on them.
Yeah. 5 calls later, don't answer phone. Brian literally was like, "I'm mid-sentence. Hang up on him."
Because I wanted to get through it. We do want it to be a call-in show, but if we don't have a topic going, it makes it sort of uninteresting.
I love the call-ins, though. I like people. One thing I wanted to answer. There was somebody in the... Never mind. Avon calling. Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hey, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you guys.
No problem.
You're fine. We want to be interrupted, especially when Levi's talking.
So this is kind of similar to what you said about the craft being about religion and not about the practice itself. How do you feel about Alexandrian craft having more importance on, because I've talked to some initiates, they've said that it's more, the importance is placed on how you practice, not so much as what you believe.
I want to take this one. This was a thing that started online quite a while ago.
And it's more by American gardeners.
And it was American initiates who started this thing where they said we are an orthopraxic religion, not an orthodoxic religion, right? Like we have orthopraxy, not orthodoxy. I'm going to go ahead and say this is not in the original documents. This is not in the Book of Shadows.
It's not original practice.
It's not original practice.
It's not how we practice.
I don't know where this came from. And also the dichotomy.
I know where it came from.
I do too. I actually could name the names, but I'm not going to. But orthopraxy versus orthodoxy is also a modern dichotomy that's misused in a lot of other religious discussions too. The big example everybody throws around is Judaism, where they say, well, the Jews, like, look at the Sadducees. They didn't believe in a resurrection, but they're still Jews. I'm like, okay, sure. But the most respected Jewish rabbis in history said that none of them, the Rambam, none of them would have said that you couldn't believe in God or the Torah and be a Jew who was righteous, right? A tzaddik or whatever. So, like, there is no concept of this. And I don't know I do know where it comes from, but it needs to be eviscerated. Like, this is just secular humanist nonsense. This is just a desperate attempt to sort of rip the faith and religion out of anything and to make it all just Jungian psychobabble.
So to answer your question, we disagree with the people you talked to.
Yeah, I just can't. I can't do this.
I think that if you're doing a ritual, just to go through the motions, it's a mummer's play, it's empty ritual. If you didn't believe in what you're doing, why are you doing it? Orthopraxy is like, okay, well, I'm holding this in my left hand because I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
I'm saying these words because I'm supposed to.
And
why are you doing it? Once again, back to the magic, right?
Exactly.
It is a magical religion. Everything we do is magic. Everything we do is filled with intent and purpose, right? There's a reason for it. I'm not saying there's one note on how we believe, but I think a faithless witch would be a useless priest or priestess.
And what Brian is saying even goes back to something else, which is this. The whole thing began, caller, with this concept of trying to make being able to split between traditions, basically, without being punished. And because they didn't really believe in the gods. Well, okay, we can have that discussion about the gods or whatever, but in an effort to be less superstitious, they have become more superstitious.
I also find it's often an excuse for people who practice multiple religions.
It's the tradition flippers.
I have found that people who use that argument are using it as a reason why they're why they're tourists, spiritual tourists, because when I'm in this kind of ritual, I do it that way. When I'm in this ritual, I do it. It's not conflicting beliefs because it's orthopraxic. It has nothing to do with belief. I find that they're very bad at what they do usually, and I don't understand them because I don't have a point of reference to that.
And it's like they gave up ground.
They're
just kneeling.
I fully 100% believe in the consciousness of the goddess and the god. How I define that may be different than some people, but I believe in that consciousness existing for humanity, and I believe in magic. It's a full belief. And the philosophies and the things that I embrace and how I serve at the altar of other, not the self, is through that belief. If I didn't have it, I love ritual, but I wouldn't want to be a part of empty ritual.
And like I was saying, is in an effort to be less superstitious, this orthopraxic argument is more superstitious because it has this belief in some sort of spiritual technologies that they've melded together from Crowley and nonsense, wannabe quantum physics or whatever. They don't understand what they're talking about. And they'll say things like, it's just I'm tapping into a current that works. And I'm like, that's very vague and it doesn't really mean anything. I believe initiation and magic are spiritual systems in entirety. They're holistically spiritual.
Religious.
They're religious. And I don't think that divorcing them from that earns you any brownie points.
Spiritual is really a fat word.
It might be. I don't believe that, I do not believe that I owe anything to enlightenment-based philosophy when it comes to my religion. And these orthopraxic people, they seem to they're trying to gain points. I'm enlightened. No, thank you.
I think that there's because of intellectualism, I think that there's a necessity for people to prove to others that, I'm intelligent. I'm not superstitious. Don't really think that. Yes, I get this and I got that. But the truth be known, that this is a belief system. It is a religion. So therefore, it's if you don't believe, you don't belong here.
And
that's my personal opinion.
I did want to say one thing. I think
in our coven, we really worship, and our worship is where the power.
Brian and I are very tired of this. So obviously, this is why we might sound a little we get annoyed by this.
Room for another question, though.
Yeah, but I will say this.
Hopefully, we've answered it.
There's one area, caller, where I think there's one area where I think I understand why they say it. And what they're trying to say is our practices that we're trained in, like my training as a witch, there's very few things that I'm required to believe in terms of what is God, what happens after I die. And so that is, if you mean that, if you mean like we don't have an insanely rigid, dogmatic system, and there's room to understand the gods in different ways, and there's room to experience the afterlife in different concepts, sure. So if you mean that, or they mean that, then yes.
We're not as rigid as some Orthodox religions.
If they mean that, then I agree with them.
But good note. Did you have another question before I go on a ramble?
I think your perspectives on you've already addressed this before. Your perspectives on polytheism. So no, I think I'm good.
I'm not anti-polytheism. I just, personally speaking, I think that this show's topic original practice. Polytheism is not a part of the Gardnerian Alexandrian tradition in how it was set forth. You can see that very clearly in our liturgy. Listen to the words of the Great Mother, who was of old called amongst men. Artemis, Astarte, Dione, Melusine, Aphrodite, etc., etc., etc. It's telling you that this is a monotheistic goddess who has been in many, many cultures. So it's just not really a part of our belief system. I think that's a very modern thing that's happening. So it's just not a part of our tradition. I think we play as polytheists, though, because when you're in the magical realm, if you're working with the goddess Brigid, well, you're thinking of the goddess Brigid. Mm-hmm. You're not necessarily thinking of this, monotheistic goddess. But in our rituals, in the rituals of the religion of witchcraft, we don't practice where we're thinking of Brigid. Ever. Yeah. So there's that. But anyway, thank you for calling in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, original practice. Wasn't actually thinking of this, but there are some concepts that when you get into the structural belief system of witchcraft, in the original practice of witchcraft, reincarnation was a thing.
Yes.
It's not in the Buddhist way. It's not, in fact, I think it's more druidic, really, if you think about it.
I think so too.
And we don't have a rigid thing, but it was a thing. It's in our liturgy. It is a belief. The original witches believed in reincarnation. I think a lot of them. I think it was like more important that you were a witch in a past life, and that was more like what Gardner and his predecessors, because I do believe he did have predecessors. I believe that they were more interested in you were a witch before.
Than hereditary.
Agreed. It was not in the blood, it was in the soul. And I think that was a big thing. And I think it's been kind of lost. I think a lot of modern initiates don't believe in reincarnation. I do, but I believe it in a loose way, in a natural way. And I don't obsess over it. No. I have memories and experiences that I do, and I've had dreams that I do think come from past lives. I would call them past life experiences, but it's not something I obsess over. I don't go looking for it, and the memories I've had vastly are not occult.
Yeah, exactly.
Other than things that attract me, I think there's a reason why we don't know, because we're not supposed to. If we knew for certain what was going to happen to us, I think it would alter what we're doing here. And I think very few human beings are ready to receive that knowledge. I think we're given hints of it sometimes so that we know that there's something. I think the reason why we're sometimes able to see ghosts, or sometimes able to have past life regressions, or sometimes have a near-death experience, and we get those stories, is to say, yes, there's something. But we're not meant to have full knowledge. And I think religions that claim to have full knowledge are lying to themselves, and we're not meant to have that. And I think witchcraft approaches it in original practices. Yes, this does happen, but we don't have full knowledge of it, and we're not obsessed with it. We're not obsessed with death.
No.
Can
I use an analogy? It's funny because it goes back to the orthodoxic thing. Like reincarnation is orthodoxic in most, I'm not going to say most, in the tradition, it is orthodoxic. It is in the source material. People might hate that, and they might want to say, no, you don't have to believe it. I'm like, I hate all that. Like, it's very much just pussyfooting around, that this idea that we don't have beliefs. We do. Let me tell you what I think about the orthodoxic thing in terms of any of this. Reincarnation, the gods, whatever. Find somebody and fall in love with them. And then look at them and say,
if you're capable of it.
If you're capable, God help you. And then ask them, do you love me? Are you going to be satisfied if their answer is, well, I bought you chocolates on Valentine's Day. Okay, but do you love me?
That's a good one.
I call you my boyfriend. Okay, thank you. That's great.
Can I try this and see how long it takes Christian to kill me?
Exactly. And if they say, well, do you love me? Say, well, I ate dinner with you in public. And then tell me how much you love orthopraxy over orthodoxy. Then tell me how much you're in love with that concept. Right?
The reason that, and I actually watched that come up, it was really an excuse for people practicing multiple traditions that conflicted with each other. That's what it was.
It is, exactly. Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Well, hi. Thank you for having me. It's so wonderful to be here.
Oh my God, it's my twin.
Who?
This is my bestie.
Who is this?
Well, my bestie in New Orleans. This is Sen Hudu Moise. This is Moses. It's Moses.
I'm here.
C'est Moïse? T'es ici?
I miss you. I miss you.
Cette reine, this queen.
You know where I am right now.
I do know where you are, and I was about to walk down the street.
That would have been funnier.
Because nobody be answering the damn phone up
It is
and
the
down.
fabulous.
Because we're on there, so I've got the phone.
L'incroyable Saint Moïse, prêtre des lois.
I can't imagine you have a question unless it's a racy one, but let's go.
Go ahead. On va continuer en français.
I don't know French.
Créole. Okay. Creole. What's your English question, O sainted Moses?
My English question. Wait till I see you again, because I'm going to bust you up. I swear to God.
You know where we are. I'm pretty sure you're right around the corner in your house with your little poochie man.
With your gay dog.
You know I am. I'm peeking in the window right now.
I might be able to get you in.
Hell no, I'm at my house. I ain't trying to be peeking around no corner right now, because that's too much work. Anyway, so the topic tonight is original practice.
Yes.
And there were touchings, if you will say.
Very lightly touching.
There were touchings on initiation.
Yes, we talked about that a little bit.
A little bit, yes. So there was a touch here and there on that. And my question is, what do you believe about initiation and the importance or lack thereof that it has to play when it comes to original practice? And then I have a follow-up question after that.
Okay. Well, I mean, as you know, I wrote a book on the subject. It wasn't really on just the subject of initiation.
You did?
But
he did.
Initiation into witchcraft. For me, personally, the path of initiation, as I like to call it, Maxine coined it, but I do call it that. I think it's a great thing because there's a story I won't get too into, and it's a Hindu story, and it's about I'm going to get into it a little bit, but it's about a man. I'll try to make it the short version, and he decides he wants to get initiated, and he knows that there's an enlightened master that's going to be in his in a nearby city, a very important enlightened master, and so he packs his bag and he goes and he journeys to the enlightened master, and he waits for him to come out of his little house. I'm shortening the story. And the enlightened master comes out with his entourage, and the man throws himself at the master's feet and says, Master, I've come for initiation. And the enlightened master looks at him and he says, Again you come for initiation. Oh, I see. Your initiation started when you packed your bags and you journeyed to come and see me. Oh, I see. You need the words and the rituals and the names. We'll do that tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
I loved this story because I do believe, and I do think initiation is cross-traditionally important. I think it's magically universal. I don't think it's a one thing. I think it's just as important in voodoo as it is in witchcraft. I think that it is a part of our human heritage. It's a magical ritual and a magical spell that is a part of our human heritage, despite whatever vocabulary you are.
Even in traditional religion.
You're seeking other, you're asking for permissions, you're offering service. So I think it's, in witchcraft as well as in voodoo, because I know we've had these conversations, it is a community thing. You are serving other. You're not serving at the altar of the self. So to me, it is extremely important. It has been an extremely important part of my journey and continues to be so. I still think I'm on the path of initiation. Yeah. I don't think it ends.
I agree with Brian. I don't think there's much that
think it's fundamentally important to
I don't think you can remove it. I really don't. Not just from witchcraft, but the entire concept.
You lose so much
joining
by taking it out.
It's like trying to live in the world without love. I wouldn't be able to understand it.
Anyway, now what's your tricky question? Because I know you've got something
it's not going to be gentle.
So here it is, in that, and
Voila.
and I love the answer that you gave. I mean, it's absolutely perfect, because
for those that you don't know, our caller here,
true.
Before he asks the question, our caller here is my friend Saint Maurice, and he is a voodoo priest. A Hugon.
He's trying.
I'm
trying,
aggressively white, everyone. I'm sorry. But he's basically a voodoo high priest, to translate it. Anyway, go ahead, Kirk. Or whatever. I never know what to call you people.
Here's the follow-up to that. So along the topic of original practice and then taking initiation into that, when would you say, or I should say, what are your feelings on when an initiation takes place? Does that put one on the path of what's deemed as original practice? In other words, when you are initiated into a tradition, is it the tradition that molds you, or is it you that molds the tradition?
Well, I think it's supposed to be the tradition molds you. Like I said, we're not serving at the altar of the self. Unfortunately, and I'm sure you have stories in voodoo, in witchcraft, there are people who don't genuinely get this, and they don't ever really serve. And sometimes we say that initiation doesn't take, but I think it's more like the initiation eventually backfires on them, because they're asking for a transformation. They're asking to serve at the altar of other, but really they are trying to serve at the altar of the self, and it just won't work. They will be stopped in their tracks. They will be turned back in some way. They will fizzle out. They will grab onto other things and try to make those tangible rope holds. I think once you're on the path of initiation in any tradition, there's no getting out of it if you're going to proceed. If you're going to proceed, you have to proceed in the laws of that tradition, and like you've often said, and I think you coined this, there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. I think when it comes to initiation, you have no choice but to really adhere to both. And if you don't, I think it will backfire.
I do think there are consequences. Whether it's voodoo, whether it's witchcraft, whether it's Christianity, I think if you go before something greater than yourself and you attach yourself to it, there are consequences to that. And I've witnessed it personally. I think it tends to make people go a little mad when they
look at that
go against
that garden gnome you used to hang out with, Moses. I'm going to call you Moses for today. You used to hang out with this garden gnome. Look how it manifests in his life. He's constantly bouncing all over the place. His life reflects that. I think that's what happens, and I could name examples too.
It's toxic. I mean, it's a terrible way to approach service. It's a terrible way to approach religion. It's all about you.
But I think that you just hit a key point there, Levi, when you spoke about the approach of service. And when it comes to original practice, and it comes to original practice being combined with initiation, who is the service for?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times what happens is, at least in my experience and what I have observed, with folks is they think that, when the initiation comes, now they're,
the magic
sitting
wand's
on a
been waved
throne,
over them.
and everybody is, they're sitting on the throne, and everybody is.
It does not imbue you with knowledge. You have to work
that.
for that.
Exactly.
When in actuality, you now have an obligation and a responsibility outside of yourself that has nothing to do with the self, but has to do with you serving the community.
Exactly. What altar are they going to?
Sid Moise, I want to throw something at you, and tell me if I'm wrong here, because obviously you know more about voodoo than I do. I've heard many stories in Haitian voodoo in particular where there is a tradition that some people will fight the call to be initiated because they know how much work it is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, of
course.
Yeah, I think that's a common theme in many of them.
I think it happens.
We talk
some
about
people in witchcraft.
The test.
I fought being initiated into Alexandrian craft.
Yep.
Because when I came to New Orleans, I considered myself already a valid initiated high priest. I'd run covens for over 25 years. Nobody was going to tell me that wasn't valid, and yada, 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 yada. So when I got the call, basically, to get reinitiated, there was a lot of conversations with me and my ego for that to happen. Yeah. For me to say, okay, I'll start over again.
And I'm sure it's the same in voodoo.
I'll start over again.
Because there's now you are indebted. When you make that relationship with the divine, you're pledging yourself to service to people and to divine spirit.
And that's a big part of why I think in initiatory craft we say that there's a problem with the solitary definition. And Moses here can speak to that. It's a community thing. If you're solitary, you are serving at the altar of yourself. We're not saying you can't do rituals, you can't worship gods, you can't do magic, you can't do things by yourself. That's not what we're saying. And sometimes that's your only option. It's fine. But in the spirit of the tradition, it is about serving other. And other is always, regardless of what other is, it's always not you.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. You're not serving you when you're serving. And to be a priest or an initiate, which are usually the same thing, is to serve. There is service required. And the higher you go up the ladder, whether it's in voodoo or whether it's in witchcraft, the higher you go up the ladder, the more service that is required.
And no matter how happy you are. Exactly. No matter how happy you are, if the only thing you worship is yourself, I guarantee in the end you will worship a cruel and wicked God.
Malkuth.
Amen to that.
Well, thank you for calling in. Let's hang out soon. You've been on my mind. I did try calling you recently, but thank you for calling in, and give Pickles a kiss for me.
Yes, he is the most adorable pug, everybody.
Oh, I will. His booty hole is like facing me right now. So
that's
I'll
beautiful.
turn him around and give him a kiss for you.
Turn him around first. Make sure.
I will. All right, y'all. Great show. And keep on keeping on then, huh?
We're going to try. Merci et bonne nuit.
Okay, bonne nuit, mon chéri.
Bonne nuit.
So I first met Moses. I never know if I can say his real name. I don't know if I'm allowed.
Sid Moise.
I get confused. Sid Moise, Hoodoo Sid Moise. I first met him. He was a friend of Christians, and he used to live in Salem even. So there's a huge history there. But I first met him at a gay bar, and he was anxious to meet me because he'd heard about Christian, and he came to find me in the bathroom, when I was coming out of the bathroom. And my very first question, well, I don't know if I should say everything I said, but we hit it off right away. We're both people that just I don't want to consider myself antisocial, but I don't like everyone.
That is an understatement. If I have ever heard one.
I don't like everyone.
There's a few people I don't like.
And
okay, Brian.
I think that Moses is even more like that. I think he really doesn't like a lot of people. But we're both very good with people. We're servants. We do our jobs. It's But as far as clicking, I don't know. We just clicked right away. So I've learned most of what I know about voodoo from him. Anyway, and if you're interested in voodoo, I'd say in New Orleans, he's the person to talk to.
I also love that you just decide people's names for them. And you're like America when it talks to other countries. Somebody's like, "Hi, I'm from the country of España." No, Spain. Brian just decides, you're Moses, deal with it. No.
Well, Moise means Moses.
Yeah, it does, yeah. Voodoo and Moise, yes. Voodoo priest.
Okay, so original practices, what else? So obviously there were, I'm a little disappointed that our devil Brian hasn't called in. He keeps harassing me about the show and he didn't call in. Anyway, I thought he was going to call and ask me about the devil.
It's fine.
We're here for it. Anyway, I think actually there was a story. Frederick Lamond talks about how somebody was asking about the devil. Go ahead.
Welcome to Covendom.
Hello, this is Frank.
Hi, Frank.
How are you?
Yes, I wanted to ask, turning back to the topic, right, of the original practice. I had read from a blog post from a coven in Ireland. The coven is Cup of Wisdom. And the coven, the High Priestess Sophia Aboan had written that at its core, Gardnerian Wicca is a reincarnation cult. And Gerald Gardner was very explicit about this, and he believed in group reincarnation, and he was taught by the coven who brought him in, right, to find each other. And that's why a lot of people, when they're seeking initiates, like, it's not about how good they are, but if they resonate with the group. Is that the same for the original Alexandrian craft when it was starting out?
I'll let Brian take the full answer, obviously, but I can say during my training as an Alexandrian priest, reincarnation was always the system. And it was always understood that witches could meet again, worship again, love again as a group. It was never understood that it would be carried in the blood or in any other way than through initiation and rebirth.
So to answer your question, the differences between Alexandrian and Gardnerian practice don't reach that far. So yes, reincarnation has always been a part of our liturgy. We come from, the Alexandrian Book of Shadows is, what we call it, the Book of Shadows, the book.
Yeah.
It's the same one. It's not like it was rewritten. Alex was initiated into Gardnerian witchcraft. I don't question the validity of that for many reasons. It's obscured, obviously. But no, fundamentally we practice exactly the same way. So there's some philosophical differences that are important, but they don't reach the base of the faith. So as far as like the god and the goddess and magic and reincarnation and those original core foundations are exactly the same within both traditions. There's no difference. We're both priesthood in the religion of witchcraft. So the religion itself does not alter between those traditions at all.
Okay. So then when you're looking at an initiate, right, if this person vibes with the group, if you're looking at that person, then you're maybe thinking like, oh, we were like together in a past life.
Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Now, weirdly enough, I'll tell you, I do think that I have known some members of the group before. I don't know that I've known all of them before. We don't obsess on it. I think that the New Forest Coven and Gardner were a little obsessed with reincarnation, quite frankly. I'm not saying that's bad. We're not particularly obsessed with it. I believe in it, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what's going to happen to me when I die. So when I'm looking at an initiate, or a potential initiate, I'm looking for several factors. I'm looking for, are they sincere? Do they really have a belief in the goddess and our ways of practicing, based on what they know? I'm looking at how intelligent they are, how capable they are to do the job of a priest or a priestess, and how compatible they are going to be to the group. All of those things come into factor. No, I'm not sitting there thinking, ooh, did I know you in a past life? I have met people that I've felt a kinship with that I think I may have known before, but I just don't spend too much time obsessing on it. So no, it's not. I do think originally the reason why you did say something very early on that I resonate with, and that I do think that the modern cult of witchcraft is a reincarnation of older cults. I think that it is a reincarnation of the mystery cults. I think its predecessor was a cult of Diana and perhaps the cult of Isis and many, many others. So I do believe, I believe in that. I believe that we are a reincarnation of a thing, and I believe reincarnation is a part of our system.
The soul of the mysteries
But I
themselves
don't think it's, it's not a rule of thumb by any means. Yeah. I do think a lot of people that are attracted to these sorts of things may very likely be attracted to them for a reason, because once you're on the path of initiation, the belief is it will stick with you. You cannot uninitiate the soul. So
exactly,
I do believe there's a thing there, but no, we don't obsess over it.
Yeah, it's
maybe some do. I don't.
I don't think it's the litmus test or anything, but it is there for sure.
Yeah. But thank you so much. Where are you from? You've got a great accent.
I'm from Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
Perfect.
Thank you for calling in.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great evening.
Puerto Ricans are always attractive.
Puerto Ricanos?
There are no ugly Puerto Ricans.
Now you know.
Now you know.
Le gustan los puertorriqueños. Okay. So, yeah, Elohim's just like, Puerto Rico! I love Puerto Ricans. They have my favorite, because I translate a lot in Spanish, and they have one of my favorite accents because they just drop the R's off of everything. So it's just a very unique.
Levi likes to mimic people's accents to make fun of them.
This is coming from you. I'm sorry that Madonna over here, it's just like.
Hey, I mean, I am at least hereditary English.
We don't believe in hereditary. This is the thing that I get mad about. We will sit and shit on hereditary witches. Everybody's like 400 years ago, my ancestors were British. I'm like, you and everybody the white person in America.
It's always, the grandmother story is still going on Facebook, isn't it? My grandmother wasn't.
So Elohim is asking, because I think this actually is a good question. The Welsh tradition, is it related to our original practices?
Okay, so let me clarify that for you really quickly because I can't answer that question. My teacher, Val Hughes, lives in Wales. She's Welsh, right?
My siarad in Cymru. She speaks Welsh.
Alex's mother was Welsh. Maxine has a home in Wales. Gardner very much liked Wales. The first museum was in the Isle of Man, which is not in Wales, but it's on the west side there. Witchcraft has lots of ties to Wales. The Isle of Anglesey is a really holy. It's called the Holy Isle to this day.
Yes, it is.
Here's what I'm going to say. If it's an American tradition, it's not Welsh. Okay, so it's a reconstruction of that culture. I don't believe that witchcraft is an ethnic faith. As we just had this conversation, I believe it's a reincarnation of a mystery cult.
Yes.
I don't think it doesn't have nothing in our liturgy talks about race. Nothing in our liturgy talks about, there might be some poetry, but literally it's not a focus. There's no focus on anything that's super Celtic or super anything. I think you had the fact that you had British witches who were in Britain. They became interested in the ancient things in that land. And so for some of them, that became an answer to we're older than this thing. Yeah. It must have come from the Celts or whatever, which is fine. But I don't believe that the witchcraft that we practice in any way resembles any one ethnic group of people. It just literally doesn't. It does, however, strongly resemble mystery cults and how they operated, which they also did not operate from an ethnic place.
Nope.
And because initiation by itself dictates that the entrance is about the mysteries and the tradition, not who you were, where you lived, where you were born, right? I think I've lost.
No, I mean the only requirement to be able to initiate it, to take
on such a tangent, I don't remember the question.
The only requirement to take initiation at Eleusis was to be able to speak Greek. You could be a slave,
you
could be free.
Be a murderer.
Yeah, you couldn't be a murderer, but you didn't have to be anything particular. You just had to be able to understand the prayers.
The reason to speak Greek was so you understood the rituals and your oaths.
I have friends. Right? I have friends in the Welsh tradition. I have friends who've been initiated into it.
Let me finish that.
Yeah. So no judgment against it.
I'm not attacking anything. And I don't know enough about the Welsh tradition to speak about whether it's just called that. But there's more than one version of it in the United States. and it originates from a woman, I think her name is Gwen Thompson, or is it Gwen Porter or something weird?
Cannot remember.
I don't know. There's a particular woman who created claimed a hereditary line. I think it's Gwen Thompson or Gwen Porter, I don't know. It's their tradition, I don't, I'm not against it.
Yeah.
It's not connected to the succession of Alexandrian and Gardnerian witchcraft. It's an independent thing. It may think it's older, and who knows? Maybe miraculously it's the one thing that is. But I'm going to say that the hateful thing I'm going to say is that if you're not Welsh, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't really just say, oh, we're, Scottish witches here in New Orleans. Let's start the Scottish witchcraft tradition here in New Orleans. We're not Scottish. We're not in Scotland. So that's very much a Llewellyn's 90 phenomenon that everyone was like picking a culture. So I'm going to guess that what they do, because I'm just guessing, they practice witchcraft, and most Welsh initiates I know are initiates of other forms of witchcraft. They like the Welsh culture. They're playing with the Welsh gods. They're working with those things, which is not, out of the realms of the universe. I'm going to just go out on a limb here and say that considering we've got so many early initiates that are connected to Welsh culture anyway, that might already be influencing witchcraft on some level. But, witchcraft is not a Welsh religion.
No.
Except don't tell my teacher that because she's Welsh, because she probably thinks it is. And can tell you she was greatly amused at the American Welsh tradition. But there's nothing wrong with it. They are practicing. My first thing, let me clean myself up here, since I know some of these people. My first line, it's the same thing I'm saying about my first line. It was the religion of witchcraft. It was a priesthood unto itself, just not connected to the succession.
Yes.
That's what I think about the American Welsh traditions. And there is more than one. And they all have these like different ways of saying it, and I don't understand.
So here's one thing I'll say. I'm going to answer this really quickly because I think Frank has a really great question that I want to hit on in chat. Here's the thing about appropriation or cultural or ethnic fades. I agree with Brian. It is a very big phenomenon in the 90s. Everyone in Llewellyn was like,
it was Odin witchcraft.
Pick a culture and be that, and then insert the name witchcraft after.
Connect to your ancestors.
Here's the weird thing. Brian, for example, has a very deep interest in Greco-Roman Egypt and Hellenistic, Ptolemaic Egypt. So do I. However, that culture is part of a historical lineage.
We love it, but
lineage.
It's not our tradition.
Here's where I get a little weird, though. Welsh culture is alive. Welsh is the most spoken Celtic language in the world. There's more people who speak it fluently.
There is a modern Welsh culture.
So when you go to Wales and you're like, I'm a Welsh witch, I'm one of you. I'm sure the Welsh people are like, no. What, in Bangor? It's just not a thing.
I do remember taking a very strange cab ride from a coven meeting in Oswestry. And here I am, and Oswestry is a border town, so it's like if you live there, half the people say it's Wales and half the people say it's not. Originally, it was a part of Wales, but technically it's in England now. English, but it's a border town. But originally, it was a part of Wales, and half the people there are Welsh, and it's a border town though. It's called a border town, and so I'm, drunkenly getting out of a coven meeting of some Sabbath, just the car with this Welsh guy. And I don't remember what I said, but I said something being cheeky about witchcraft. And he says, oh, there's loads of them here.
Yeah.
They're all over the place here in Oswestry.
Or just eat up with them. Eat up with witches.
I don't know if he was playing with the tourist, because he had no idea.
Maybe.
But, there's loads of them here. I had to tell them, do you know they said there's loads of them here? They know. But yes, I mean, working with a Welsh coven, our mother coven, I guess you could say, is a coven in Wales. And it's run by a Welsh high priestess. So it's really weird when you have that experience, to hear an American person that doesn't know how to speak Welsh, there's no connected Welsh, probably isn't even Welsh, saying, oh, I'm in the Welsh tradition. Okay.
I know, and a lot of them don't. And here's the thing: I'm a student of the Welsh language. I have been for about a year now, over a year.
It's a made-up language.
It's not
created to piss the English off.
And I've been studying it for over a year.
I'm quoting Rosie on that one.
And I still have. It is an incredibly difficult language for native English speakers.
I'll constantly say the Welsh witches are coming, and Rosie's like, I'm actually English, more Scottish.
And actually, most of them are.
Not Val though.
Yeah, Val's the only Welsh. But I I meet a lot of people who are in the Welsh tradition who really can't speak Welsh at all. And that's a little problematic because the language is very difficult to pronounce. And
they didn't create the tradition. They were initiated into it. The founder of it, Gwyn Thompson, I think is her name, is someone who was claiming, as Robert Cochrane did. Robert Cochrane, I believe, claimed to be of Welsh witchcraft descent. Well, Wales is very popular in the narrative of modern witchcraft. So we can't, well, makes sense. The Isle of Anglesey is there. So there's obviously some kind of power going on it, but there's no real such thing as a modern Welsh tradition of witchcraft. Because in Britain, the traditions of witchcraft were Gardnerian and Alexandrian. Robert Cochrane went extinct. Sybil Leek, there are some people who claim to be of her, but they're in America. And Charles Cardell didn't go anywhere. So, you've got, whispers of hereditary and whatever. It's changed the game over there as much as it's here, but from the early 50s to at least the 90s, if you were a witch, you were Gardnerian and you were Alexandrian. If you were anything else, you weren't talking about it, and you still aren't. So
he's got opinions, children.
Well, it's just fact. It's not really.
I set him up for that, and he swung and hit.
It's fact, and that's the thing that a lot of people don't like. I think is that there are certain things that, regardless of how you or I feel about it. Huge red button for people right now is the fact that in our traditional witchcraft, I think somebody was hinting on this earlier, is that it's well known that we do cross-gendered initiations. And I think this is a very important topic. We cannot go through the evening without talking about it.
That is so close. We have 9 minutes to do this.
No, we can go on as long as we want.
We have 9 minutes to do this.
No, we'll go on because we're going to finish this topic. Because we were interrupted earlier. And Levi doesn't really have any plans in COVID-19 other than to eat ice cream with his boyfriend.
He doesn't.
So, here's the thing. Obviously, in witchcraft, there was a setup that went on that first of all, there's 2 things I want to say here. Number one, I think a big part of our practice that's been forgotten is that it's none of your business.
This I agree with.
I think that really, well, you're going to agree with everything I say. This is, no, I mean, you will. I'm not going to say anything you don't agree with.
I know.
So the reality, I wasn't a command. He's equal rank to me, So the thing is that that's not happening enough. We don't owe people explanations. We don't owe people conversations. This is witchcraft is a secret society still. And that's a hard pill for people to swallow. If you're not initiated within the priesthood, you don't know a lot. You don't know what we do.
Valid.
You're not involved. And that hurts people's feelings and upsets apple carts. And people want to be, they got FOMO, fear of missing out. But the reality of it is that's true. And it's also none of your business.
Yeah, I do agree with
how I worship God, who I worship God with, what I'm doing in my private establishments is none of your business. And if I choose to never worship with you, that is also my God-given right and currently constitutional right? So there we go. So that being said, however, we do educate, witches have chosen to educate the general public. So we have kind of opened that can of worms. So one of the big topics is the fact that we have cross-gendered initiations. In the craft, men initiate women and women initiate men. What needs to be understood, other than it's none of your business, is that this is not only an original practice, but a current practice. Mm-hmm. Not saying people aren't going to come up with other practices or people aren't going to do other things. But I think it's important to have the conversation of why we think this matters now, which is what we promised to say in this show. So, if I were to, and I'm going to let Levi take the ball here because he's going to know what I'm doing. If I were to all of a sudden say, in the New Orleans coven, we now can have same-sex initiation. Okay? Say I make that decision, which is my right. No one can stop me from doing it. People could leave my coven over it, but nobody can stop me from doing it. People in the tradition could denounce me and say that's not Alexandrian, and they'd be right, but no one can stop me from doing it. So let's say I did that. What would happen in my group would be akin to me just starting my own witchcraft tradition with the cult of personality. No women in my group would be able to outpower me because I could initiate any man I wanted to. I could initiate any woman. I would become the real supreme.
Yep.
Because no woman would be necessary. I'm already Brian Cain with the stores and the cult of personality. And I would get plenty of gay guys who wanted to be initiated by me, I'm sure. Or Levi, I could have him do it. Some of you think he's rather hot, I'm hearing lately. But the point is that what I'm saying here is that the only people that benefit from same-sex initiation ever is going to be men.
100%.
The reason why that it was a staunch rule, other than it's a part of our magic, I mean, there's multiple reasons why I'm not going to explain to you, nor would this be a conversation. If you got initiated in my coven, I'm not going to say who's going to initiate you.
No.
You're going to find out when you're initiated, regardless of how you feel about it. And if you didn't like it, well,
too bad.
It's your initiation.
Bye, girl.
But the reality of it is that is a part of the original practice in those traditions. It's never going to change. There may be fringe groups that decide to do something else. That's already happened. That happened in the 60s. It happened in the 70s. It happened in the 80s. It's just always going to happen. But these original beliefs and practices are going to go on because the religion of witchcraft is going to go on, and it's going to have its fringe groups and it's going to have its pure groups. The reason I think it's important is because it comes down to serving at the altar of other. If you feel like you need to be the one that decides how and who's going to initiate you, you are not serving at the altar of other.
At all.
You're serving at the altar of yourself.
Just
you want to be initiated the way you want to be initiated, by who you want. I want to be initiated by a man. I want to be initiated by a woman. You don't get to choose that if you're serving. An initiation is a request. It is not a decree. I think that it really is an epiphany to me that the modern craft is apologizing and having this conversation at all. It's no one's business. We initiate how we initiate. If you don't like it, it's not for you.
100%.
There are plenty of options.
I'll take it a bit further. I think what Brian said in all of that is very crucial, that gets forgotten, is there is a lot of posturing about this right now, where people say, you're closed-minded, if you don't believe in same-sex initiation, this is about making everybody inclusive. What Brian said is really important. No, this is about men. And this is super important to bring up. We have had lesbian Wicca in this country since Susanna Budapest.
She doesn't call it Wicca.
She did for a while.
Did she?
Yeah, Diana Wicca.
I think other people did that.
No, she uses the term. Right?
Right.
But regardless of what she calls it, the Susan B. Anthony Coven, all of these things, we have had lots of lesbians, and I'm using that term not tongue-in-cheek, they're self-identified lesbians, starting covens. Nobody really cares anymore. Nobody's bitching about them. Nobody's arguing about it. What people are talking about, and what I see, is gay men in the craft who've decided they don't want to follow the rules anymore, and they want to have, same-sex initiations. Okay, that's really about being a man. I don't think it has anything to do with queer liberation. I don't think it has anything to do with politics. I think it's about power. And I think if you are going to say, under patriarchy, which we live in, whether you like it or not, I would like a coven where men get to make all the decisions. Well, okay, that's not the mysteries anymore. That's just earth. That's not religious. And I've never seen this conversation go anywhere else in my years as an initiate,
regardless
or
of
before
the
it.
angles.
Regardless of the angles talked about. I've never seen it go anywhere else than basically male ego. And if, like Brian said, if you are not going to kneel down and worship the other, you're not ready.
A bit of threatening in the sense that in the craft, regardless of what you think about Gerald Gardner or Alex Sanders or us or anyone else, it was very well established in our early doctrines that the priestess role was protected. And I think that that's often forgotten, that rule protects the priestess role. Once I do believe this, we are in a male-dominated society. Once that rule is no longer valid, the priestess really doesn't matter.
Agreed.
And I don't think people really think about that.
It exists to disempower women. That's it.
Yeah, I don't think people are doing it consciously. I don't think anyone's going out consciously doing it. But here's the other thing we need to think about. So for me personally, I'm a gay man, obviously.
Really?
Right?
In this caftan? It's such a masculine caftan.
This is not a caftan. This is actually quite fashionable.
It's a masculine caftan, everyone.
I bought it from a company, I think it's called O2 or Or2 or something like that. They sell these great things. But anyway, it's winter layering.
I'll meet you on the lanai later.
It's very long, like a trench coat. You just can't see it. So you've totally
I totally derailed you.
What was I saying?
Something about the gays, I believe. I'm kidding.
The bottom line is I don't want to be initiated by a man.
You said as a gay man.
Yes, as a gay man. I don't want to be initiated by a man. Don't. I really, really benefit from what's happened. But, you know, if I would have come into witchcraft and, you know, resonated with that, I mean, I kind of knew, you know, going into witchcraft I was going to be initiated by a woman because enough's out there that I was kind of able to dissect that was probably the thing. No one had the conversation with me, though, not in my first tradition, nor in my second tradition, really, that this is what's going to happen in your initiation. How do you feel about that? You know, it's not an option. It's not. If you're having a conversation with people and getting their permission on how to initiate them, you are not fit to initiate. You've given away all your power. You know, and I do believe that. Initiation's not supposed to be this is how I'd like to make my Happy Meal order.
Would you trust? Let me give you another analogy. Yeah. Would you trust a teacher if they really were like that? Like, let's say I'm trusting someone, a doctor, to operate on me and to change my life.
I never told you who was going to initiate you.
But let's say the doctor comes to you and goes, "How do you feel if I kind of cut here? Do you think it's a good idea if I cut you there?" It's like, I would like a different doctor. You know what I mean? Who's not going to ask me?
It's just not part of the tradition. Right. Now, I'm not saying this is a huge problem. Mostly, I think that most Gardnerians and Alexandrians are practicing original practice. Now, let me give you a sideline here, part of original practice. There's no rule in original practice that excludes anyone from the craft.
No.
Men, women, sexuality, there's no rule. There's nothing written down in any of our liturgy. I mean, I believe in this. Obviously, I'm a gay liberal, right? Democrat, probably forever now that Donald Trump's come along the scene. Me and Christian used to joke that
you become log cabin
gay
Republicans.
Marriage. When gay marriage got legal, we were like, gay marriage is legal. We can become a Republican now.
You can't, though.
You know, but Trump's ruined that for everyone. So I'm going to stay a constitutional monarchist. But, you know, the point of it is that I believe in this. People have suggested to me when I moved to New Orleans, I put feelers out because I thought, maybe I'll just go practice voodoo. Mm-hmm. You know, I had stepped down as high priest of my coven in Washington when I left because I was leaving. Yeah. And they appointed new leadership. And, you know, I was out. I was no longer in the priesthood. I was still an initiate, still third degree, but I was not in the priesthood because I was on my own. Mm-hmm. So, maybe I'll practice voodoo or something. You know, I didn't know what that meant at the time. You know, I was all terribly excited about all the exotic possibilities. And, you know, I reached out to a few covens that were in the area that knew. I had more than one Gardnerian high priest suggest to me to become a member of the Minoan Brotherhood.
Yes.
I think it was like 3. I think they were all in emails.
Who don't know, practice
same-sex initiation. Minoan is a Gardnerian offshoot that's an all-male cult. I kept saying, don't want. They were suggesting it for me for no reason other than I was gay and
I hate that.
Gorgeous, right?
Okay, wow, first of all.
What's the motive here? Why would you steer someone to something like that?
I agree with Brian. It's fishy.
And I've seen it happen.
It's fishy.
And I kept saying, no, sorry, not for me, you know, because I can't envision. First of all, they do worship a goddess, the Minoan Brotherhood. But women aren't allowed in.
I know.
I know it was born, and I know the elder of the Minoan Brotherhood. I know the oldest living initiate in the Minoan Brotherhood. And he has told me, I'm not going to name him, but they know who he is. And he has told me, he said to his downline, we don't matter anymore. We're not relevant. It was born out of the idea, and this conversation comes up a lot, that early in America, it was really hard for gay men to get to be initiated by covens because there was a lot of homophobia. You know, there's nothing in the craft that says that, but it still occurred. And guess what? I support their right to do that. Doesn't mean I agree with it as a person, but as somebody who lives in a place where it's like your religious liberty is free, there's a separation between church and state. I do not believe anyone's religious worship should be, regulated. Mm-hmm. You have the right to worship whatever you want, with whomever you want. I fully support that to my own benefit.
Yes.
And I really, really, understood why they did that. They wanted to be a part of something they weren't allowed to be a part of, so they started a group. It's come up for different reasons. But he said to his own downline recently, no longer serves a purpose. Half the priests are gay now.
Exactly.
So a lot of people come up with this whole, they didn't used to allow gays in, now they do, so things change. The thing is, nothing did change. People changed their attitudes, but nothing in the craft changed. There's nothing in original practice or in any of our liturgy that says a gay man cannot be in the craft. There's nothing in our liturgy that excludes anyone. Doesn't mean particular covens or people didn't come up with things. For in fact, Alex would not initiate people who were disabled. He would not initiate people who worked with the dead.
Like morticians, yeah.
I think there was another rule as well.
Butchers, slaughterhouse workers.
Yeah, dead. Yeah. He had those rules, but those were his rules for his group, for his reasons. They weren't from the original practice.
Yes.
They just weren't. So, they're not necessarily universally carried on. I think me being the person I am, I'm like, do I want to, would I initiate a mortician? I don't know.
I don't know either. I have to think about it.
It does put me at pause because I'm a bit, as Christian likes to call us, Shiite Alexandrian.
A little.
But anyway, so the original practice of witchcraft is, to sum it up, we believe in a god and a goddess. We believe in polarity. We believe in nature. We believe in the reality of nature. Nature is not a man-made construct. We believe in magic. We believe in, what else do we say? We believe in initiation. We believe in other. There's a whole lot of community things going on here. And other is always a thing. When you get to the argument, our argument against solitary practitioners isn't really the argument they're having.
No, not at all.
Because they're not servants yet. If you're a solitary practitioner and that's all you've ever done, and all you may be able to do, nothing wrong with that. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that the original practice was about serving at the altar of other and not at the self. So it really wasn't designed to be solitary. You required someone with a different body than you. You required somebody else to approve you. You required a group of people to want to work with you. The magic required other in every way, shape, or form. And it's, it works for me, and it's what I believe in. There's also myriads of other paths now.
Exactly. And we're not a universalistic faith. There's no punishment on the other side. There's no hell if you're not initiated. We do not believe that ours is the only path to truth.
We don't even really have that there's a reward for being initiated. There's nothing in our religion that says, because you got initiated,
here's your special
you're
place
going
at
to
the
live
table.
in the grandest palace. It doesn't exist. Initiation is a magical choice for the foolish.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Run. It's like we were talking with Simoes earlier. Well,
if you want to call in, Levi's about to call us off.
I am. I'm about to kill it dead.
One last time, last questions. We're going to answer last questions, and then we're going to call it a do.
I think
the number is 504-321-3472 if we're not already cut off. And we'll call it a do.
So, yeah, if we don't get a last one, I did want to hit... actually, no, we hit the ones. We hit the major ones. I wanted to say... I think what Brian has repeatedly said tonight, and what I definitely agree with completely, obviously, as somebody who's taken, high priesthood in this religion, is initiation and traditional witchcraft practice from the beginning was seen as a religion of service, a religion of magic, a religion of transformation for the self. What it was never seen as in the early days was a hobby. It was not. It was taken seriously.
No, you can look at the old elders. Lois Bourne did a video that's not flattering, that I won't repost because it's not flattering, but I loved what she said. People were taking advantage of her, getting her on film when she was old and ill. But I remember her saying, the god and the goddess love you, and they want you to be happy. She didn't know she was probably broadcasting this on YouTube. She probably was saying it to the person in front of her, but And it was wrong of that person to take advantage of her. But it was such a beautiful, you could see in this dying woman, this dying high priestess, absolutely was filled with the love of the gods.
Yes.
It was real. And you saw it, didn't you?
Yes, and they are real.
It was tangible.
They are real.
Like, they love you. They want you to be happy and successful.
There's no, there's no
it
concept.
was like really just like real, to see that.
If you want to worship nothing, then nothing you'll be.
I love Gerald Gardner. I'll never say anything to disparage him because he was a good man. And the gods
I can't with
and
Lois.
The gods
I
and the
can't.
goddess love you. And well, we are intimately aware that Lois spent some of her days with Alexandrians. So, I mean, that's that's like we've kind of got the inside story there.
Yeah.
I don't know where the Gardnerians were. Sorry, don't mean to be shade, but you weren't
shade.
there. I know this for a fact. That was shade though, wasn't it?
A little. It's okay though. I support this shade.
But anyway, there could have been some there. I don't know.
And I think what I'll say is this. I think, we've said a lot about what it is, what isn't, what original practice is, but one of the things Sen Moise said is true. It is service, and you can always smell it on people when they're not serving anything but themselves, as Brian has said all night too. The original practice,
the goddess keeps me in check from being a megalomaniac magician.
Just ego, exactly.
In my faith, in my coven, in every aspect, and I rely on the priestesses to represent her in an earthly way, because we do believe in as above, so below. And that's a thing that I think a lot of people forget, is we're not like just one-sided. Like in our traditional witchcraft, the material plane matters as much as the spiritual plane.
It's the fleshy world.
Which is why we're often considered a nature religion, because we actually care about the tangible things as well. And those are the symbols we use. We use nature's symbols. And I often say, if we're going to get into dangerous territory, take it up with Mother Nature. I'm not responsible for the design.
And take it up with the gods, because they'll live in your life or they won't. Yeah. But I want to say one thing before we go. I am going to say thank you to everyone who called in and asked a question.
He wanted it to be a call-in.
I wanted to do call-in, and I thought for a minute, I was like, it's going to fail, and Brian's going to be like, see, we got to do something else.
One last call.
One last call. Let's see who it is. I hope it's Jesus.
I hope it's Devil Brian.
Welcome to Covendom.
Hello.
Hello. Who's this?
Oh, sorry. Let me hit the TV. Okay. So I was wanting to know, when you talk about service, are you talking about service to the gods, to your coven members, and to the community? And what does that kind of entail?
All of the above.
Yeah, I was just going to say
it's all of it.
It's all of it. Now, it does vary, because you've got, in the craft, you've got priesthood and you've got high priesthood. So priesthood, initially, you're probably required to serve your coven and the gods. You're not actually required to have any kind of public thing. In fact, you're never actually required to have any kind of public thing. So there's nothing in the craft that actually says we have to have any connection with the public. However, the manifestation of reality is that, generally speaking, some high priesthood have always traditionally held a public presence. This started with Gerald Gardner, and it's been carried on by high priesthood, throughout the entire experience up to the present day. This is not a role for first degrees. That's usually not accepted or allowed. But, because really, it's not.
Yeah,
agreed.
Agreed.
Now, so if you see a first degree trying to do it, well, they're off. They're serving at the altar of the self for sure. But it is something that's occurring. So I think overall, in reality, it is serving all of those things.
Absolutely.
And I think that the role in the public sense, in my mind, is really about reconnecting people to the goddess and the reality of magic. I think that's really our priestly role for the public. I don't think, and to be there in times of need.
Agreed.
Okay. Yeah, because it's like you were saying, it seems like modern witchcraft, and I'm not talking about traditional, it seems so much more about the self.
Oh, it is.
It is entirely and utterly.
If you look at, if you look at what me and Levi are sort of railing against, it's the goddess is being removed, women are being removed. The entire same-sex initiation and the whole devil thing is removing women. That is what it is.
Super broy.
So they're trying to make it very, and it is mostly gay men doing it, sad to say, not us, but, it is happening. So it's increasingly trying to become misogynistic, because that's what we need is,
more misogyny
in the world. Right? We're not a women's cult. We're not unbalanced. We're balanced. It's perfectly balanced. The problem is that whenever you're encountering it, of course they're attacking the goddess. That's of course what they're doing, because she's a threat to their power. And I don't think most of them know they're doing it. I don't think they're consciously doing it. I think it's just what's happening. But the self is, if you're a male, the self is male, right? And I think we see that in patriarchy, and the fact that Orthodox religion is usually, always male dominated, is because they're all serving at the altars of the self. Most people we know who we despise, who are completely Orthodox religion, are men who are very clearly worshiping the god of themselves in the sky. The God we call the God of the Christians, the God of the Jews, it's the God of every dad in every household.
Yes, it's big sky dad.
It's the God of the self. They're worshiping themselves, and it's happened before and it'll happen again. But that's not witchcraft. Witchcraft is supposed to be about challenging yourself and serving. And to serve is to serve something you cannot ever be.
Because then if you can become it, then it's just self-serving.
Correct.
Exactly. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for calling in. And again, thanks to everyone who called in. I really enjoyed this. And we're going to continue this format. So we will see you. We're doing next Friday.
I did like the calls, but I've got no idea for what the show is.
So send us in the comments ideas.
I'm sure we'll come up with something in the next few days, but we always welcome ideas.
Absolutely.
We've now done, 24 episodes. So this is the 25th episode. And we commit each season to being 12 episodes. So... we've done a lot.
I know.
The focus of this show is always on BTW and Historic Craft. And we're not on here trying to be we're representing everyone, but we are. I once made a statement on here, I'm not representing Alexandrian Craft. Well, I am. What I was trying to say by that is that I'm not trying to be the authority. I'm not an authority on gardening witchcraft. I'm not a Gardnerian priest. I just happen to have a lot of knowledge that some of you wouldn't have. And I am an authority on the religion of witchcraft. But if you're not in that line, you're not going to have that.
Yes.
And I'm not an authority on every Alexandrian line. I've never been in the silver line. I've been taught things about it, but I wouldn't sit here and say I'm an expert, because I'm not. So we're doing the best we can.
And we're going to keep doing it.
But we'd have to have an Olympian panel to represent Nishtoi Craft right now.
No, we're representing what we can represent.
Yeah.
But next time, we're going to...
Hey, somebody's got to do it. They're not.
Well, give us some shout-outs in the comments for things you'd like to see for the next topic, and call in and ask. And
I think Gardnerians are... I'm not going to name names.
You are literally just not letting this happen. I
will, but...
No, you won't.
There are some Gardnerians who I really love, but you're all far too apologetic. I don't think... If I'm going to leave with this with the original practice...
Yes.
Right? So we're going to close this off. He wants to go home. He wants to eat his ice cream, his sherbet, whatever. Here's the thing. In the end of the day, I think that all initiates need to remember this. It's none of their business. And I think that's... I'm not going to speak for the British on that, but I do know it's in their constitution. I think as an American, we need to really bring that home as well. There's all this talk online, religion should somehow be sort of under this set of rules. Religion is not set by any rules. Religion can be good, it can be bad, it can be horrible. It's what a person believes, whether you like it or not. And in this country that I'm finally proud to be a part of, again, after 4 years of horrid, is there's religious liberty, separation between church and state. Nobody has the right to govern what you believe, not even the government. So if the government can't tell you what to believe or how to worship, why should you let somebody on Facebook do it? That I don't agree with that. I think it's a dangerous, evil path to start telling people how to worship. So all we're doing on this episode and in all of our works is saying, this is what we do. This is what was done. We're not telling you how to believe. That's not our role or our desire.
No.
At all. We don't care. Because at the end of the day, him and I are going to be in small circles with people that are really important to us because we knew them for several lives. And we're going to be working magic to change the world and our worlds. And everything else doesn't matter. We do this because we have no friends.
That is my favorite way to end this ever. Why are you a witch? There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing to do. Okay.
Anyway, thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Sorry about the technical issues. We have them every time we take a break.
We're in New Orleans. If you think the internet is not going to screw up here, then you don't live here.
It wasn't the internet.
Or something. Whatever the world is. But it's been an absolute pleasure, and we will see you next time on Covendom. Bye, guys.